So this is probably our last video. This is just an informal video. As you can see, I'm not at home. I'm actually, as most of us are over Christmas, travelling around to see people, and I'm currently in a Premier Inn, as you can tell by the purple. Just thought I'd give you just a very quick audio version of how we did the video and the ideas behind it. I think quite early on I thought I was in the studio with Lester discussing whether how we would do the video, and I think the idea we were going to do all these different treatments of our old songs, that's where the idea of people watching the old videos came up, and then that naturally led on to perhaps everyone sitting in a cinema looking at the old videos, and that was the embryonic idea. So I took that away, and I realised that obviously, short of setting up a fake cinema to film in, which is almost impossible, completely impractical, I would have to create it digitally. So I looked around online to see if there were any 3D cinemas I could download, and I found one, and I found another 3D cinema seat I could download. So before I committed myself, I created the internal cinema. I also filled it with seats. I also animated them so I could flip the seats up and down, so I could determine which seats were up and which seats were down. And so came to the conclusion that it probably was possible. And one thing I'd have to do is decide who was going to sing on each verse. And for the purposes of the image, it looked better if there were no more than 3 people in the shot at any one time. So that restricted us to having a maximum of 3 people, but we could have between 1 and 3. But obviously we'd have to change the seat configuration because people can't sit on seats that are up. I learned that as a small child. And so having done that, I then created a lot of shots, pre-filmed them because they take ages to render, and I used a piece of software which I've used before called Blender, and that allowed me to create the cinema, actually plan all the shots, and also get a lot of the background done beforehand, because there are things like when you zoom between 3 sets of singers to the next sets of singers, it zooms along the row. Well, that's quite easy to do, but I wanted it to look good, so I had some seats in front. So if you see, as it zooms between 2 sets of people, you'll see the heads of people in the row in front coming across, and they're all fake. But at that speed, when it's blurred, you don't see it. So that was the inside of the cinema. So that looked like that was going to be feasible. I also had another idea. It would be quite fun to have the cinema in Chelsfield, otherwise there'd be no external shots of Chelsfield. So I went on Google Street View to work out which building would suit itself to being a cinema if I were to tweak it in post-production. And I was going to use the pub, but it's too distinctive and it would be silly. And there was obviously the cottages over the road. There were lovely white-boarded cottages, a white-boarded house, which my mate Alex lives in. And I thought, no, that's still, again, it's too distinctive. But the lovely cottages on the other side of the road opposite the pub, where my friends Peter and Mandy live, there's quite a nice, they've got white walls and quite a nice space that I could easily nick. So I went out one day when the weather was calm, and I got my drone to film a shot, so I could have a shot that zoomed in from altitude to the front of their cottage. And my idea was that while it was zooming in, a cinema would appear as if by magic. Now, the cinema outside, that had to be designed entirely from scratch. So I took the Google Street View and I essentially built, using that as a model to get the dimensions and the proportions right, I built a cinema which was a front wall, and the bit which has the, what do they call it, the bit that overhangs. There was a bit of an Art Deco arch, the doors, poster frames, and all the lettering saying Bell Drinkers the movie. I built all that in Blender. And the problem is then the really tricky bit is getting that to fit onto the drone footage, because obviously the drone is a moving camera, but there's a thing in the software I use for a majority of this, is a bit of software called After Effects, where you can take something like drone footage and you can say, interpret it as 3D, i.e. look at it and work out, are there any quite obvious surfaces that are in 3 dimensions? And it did that, and it obviously managed to spot that that wall was of a certain size, and therefore what it can do is it can give you, when it does that, it says, okay, I now know exactly what a flat surface would look like, and it can give you a complete mapping of the camera. So what it does essentially is it recreates the 3D flight path of the drone, which you can then import into Blender. Then all I had to do was line up my model cinema with whatever it thought the flat surface was, and then I could then render that cinema scene out using that imported camera. And when I place one over the other, magically they all line up, and it worked remarkably well. The only thing I did realise is I wanted it to be at night. And obviously, filming at night is awful because you've got there's no light, and therefore tracking anything or getting After Effects to work out what surfaces are is impossible, because it just doesn't, you can't see enough. So I filmed it in the daytime and made it look like night. But then obviously the issue there is, of course, is in the daytime you can't just make it dark because it looked like the village was in blackout. So I had to essentially fake up street lights and lights in windows so it looked like there was some light in the village. Otherwise it looks like there's a power cut. So I did that. I replaced the sky with a sort of Christmassy starry sky, because just purely darkening the sky, it looked awful. So I did that. That was fine. So that scene worked, and I put all the various effects of the cinema appearing, and obviously a lot of that you can help it by having sound effects and things like that. That always adds to the illusion. The Blender I use to the bit at the beginning where it zooms through the doors, and then obviously the scene where it comes into the cinema and goes up to the screen. Again, I had to do exactly the same technique for that, which is I had to get it to. I had to work out what the angles were. So what I didn't want to do was have to import the video footage into Blender and render out every time I wanted to use that particular shot with different video, having to render it out in Blender, because it takes days. So I worked out an expedient way of doing that. So you get that shot where it zooms in. The advert, again, I recreated the popcorn in Blender. That was all done manually. I created the popcorn thing and I animated it. Also, the popcorn explodes out the top, and I created the rest of the advert in After Effects, and so that took a little while, but that was quite a nice, fun side project. The rest of it was just filmed. You know, my opening guitar bit I filmed standing on a chair in my garden, and then I made it look sort of Wild West and black and white. Again, to do the cinema shots, everyone had to come into my conservatory, where I had a big green screen which I bought specially, had 3 identical stools, and they could sit on those stools in prescribed places, and I put bits of tape on the floor when they came in, the lighting would be the same, and I filmed them all miming to that. The bit in the middle, with a bit between the verses where all the musicians appear in a bauble each, a Christmas tree bauble. That was quite fun, animating the baubles to go up and down on the branches and wave in the breeze. That was fun. The middle section again was all done in After Effects, just taking all the various different frames. I animated the cinema reels. A lot of it's just standard After Effects. A lot of these things don't come down to technology so much as having an idea, and once I came up with an idea that I liked, I was able to essentially put it together quite easily after that. I also wrote a lot of code so that I could effectively, if I was going to bring in, say, 50 pieces of footage, I would write as much automated code as I could, so that if I applied that effect, it would, say for instance, you want it to fade in and fade out, I could adjust the length of a clip, and it would fade in and fade out, no matter how long how long or short the clip was. I could also get the frame round each instrumentalist to flash when it arrived. Again, that was a piece of code which was written so it didn't matter when I trimmed the clip, it would always work. So all sorts of things like that. At the end, again, it all comes down to ideas, really. We filmed in the pub. The first time we'd ever filmed and recorded the audio in the pub. So we recorded all the singers at the end, actually, on the day we did it. That was the first time we did that. Obviously, the take you see in the video is them miming, because obviously we had microphones and everything for actually audio recording. So we got them to do a mime through at the end, and that meant we could yell instructions to them over the top without it coming out on the recording. Paul coming up the steps and in black and white and we're going down the pub and turning into colour. That was an idea Lester and I had while we were leaving the studio only a couple of weeks beforehand. And I thought it would be quite nice to make it a bit like Wizard of Oz, you know, where it goes from black and white to colour for the final scene. Everything else was just recorded in the studio. Lester recorded some on his digital SLR. I recorded some. It was all very much as before, but most of the things are the ideas, and that was once you got the idea, it's fine. I did manage to, because a lot of it was pre-production, as in the cinema stuff. I got a lot of it done in June, July, because once you've got a good idea, it all becomes much simpler. But obviously these videos are complicated because you're going to have so many people on them. And if people are contributing, you really want them filmed as well, because you don't want them just to be on the credits. You want to be able to see people. So there's a lot of filming and a lot of mucking about, and it's all great fun. And it doesn't take that long to put together at the end, but it took me probably, from having all the various different pre-composed bits, about 2 days to put together. Anyway, it went down well. We got over 5,000 views, and it's probably still climbing. Our most successful venture ever. So we're all very pleased with it. But that was how the video was filmed. I hope you enjoyed it. See you later.